So we'll begin with the roll call. Counselor Colby,
Here.
Counselor Ganong,
Here.
Counselor La Rochelle,
Here.
Counselor Ward,
Here.
Counselor Lunt,
Here.
Counselor Fellows,
He will be joining us directly following the Water Commissioners meeting.
and Counselor Albert. Will he be later as well?
He is working nights this week. He'd hoped to be able to participate, so if we see him join, we'll just let him pick up in kind as well.
All right. You don't need a motion for
No,
that.
he
Decide.
intends to be here, so let's leave it at that.
All right. And then for the Finance Committee, Heather Ward,
Here.
Noli Lopez,
Here.
Curtis Lunt, he's muted.
He hit the peace sign. We saw him.
All right. And then Dan Lehman.
Here.
Okay.
From the school department, Twyla.
For the school department, we have Rick Green
Yeah, here.
and Haley McCrader.
Here.
I don't believe there's any others from the school committee, correct?
Nope, that it looks like everybody that's on right now.
Okay. So the first item is good news and recognition.
Anybody got anything they'd like to share? Other than the beautiful weather, it's a good day to get outside. Seeing none, we're gonna move right along, Twyla.
Right, there's no public hearing, and this would be the time when audience participation and response for agenda items happen. Those listening from Town Hall live video streaming are now invited to send written comments by emailing award@lisbonme.org. Counselor Ward will review emails.
I have one email that I received today on my personal email address. From James Schaefer. As I'm sure you're already aware, we have started a petition to keep Main Street open, and it's now over 450 signatures. Also, I have personally spoken to 5 business owners on Main Street who oppose the road closure. These business owners deserve to be heard and considered before it is too late. I've already contacted the newspapers with the information I have gathered. Thank you, James. That is the only email that I have at this time.
Okay. And the next would be the consent agenda. So consent agenda items are considered to be routine and would be considered for adoption by one motion with no separate discussion unless a counselor requests an item to be removed for immediate discussion. Any counselor wishing to remove an item may do so now. Seeing none. Order 2021-52 to approve the municipal accounts payable warrants for $320,476.50. B, the municipal payroll warrants for $138,676.84, and D, the school payroll warrants for $364,408.39.
Make a motion to approve.
Need a second, please?
I'll second.
Have the first and the second. Any discussion?
This will be by roll call. No discussion? Okay, Counselor La Rochelle,
Yes.
Counselor Ward,
Yes.
Counselor Lunt,
Yes.
Counselor Ganong,
Yes.
Counselor Colby,
Yes.
and Counselor Fellows. Oh, he's not here right now. 5-0.
Next item, Twyla?
Under council orders, resolutions, and ordinances, order 2021-53, the school budget presentation.
You have the floor, Rick. Thank you.
Twyla, can you make me a co-presenter so I can put up a slideshow?
Oh, you should be able to share your screen as you are.
All right.
What you needed to do is share your screen.
Yep.
Okay,
Can everybody see that?
we
Yes,
can
sir.
now.
Yep.
You can see it? Okay, so earlier today, or last night, the school committee approved an updated budget. I know for the finance committee, this may be the first time that you've seen any of our presentations. So what I've done is I put together an overview of all the different components of the school department budget. And I've shared the documents that you received this morning. You received the original copy of what we call the subsidy comparison report, which is pretty much the main document that we use from after we do the initial presentation. And for those of you that the expense reports are the 50 or 60 pages of different line items that that I shared as well, but you would be able to go back and watch the initial presentation. If you had any questions on any of those lines, you can go back to the original presentation, which was recorded, and we went through each of those line items. So tonight, what I'm doing is I'm just providing you with an overview, and I'm going to try to do my best to explain how to interpret and understand the subsidy comparison report, which is what I'll be moving forward, is the one that generally will be updated and changed. And so there are a lot of numbers on there that you have to combine and add. And so I'm going to try to do the best I can for those that's first time hearing this, so that you'll understand how the school budget or where the funding and stuff comes from. So you received the original subsidy comparison report, which was dated on February 22nd, 2021. And the one that the school committee approved last night is dated March 8th, 2021. And so moving forward, whenever I do a presentation or an update, I'll always reference that particular date, and you'll find that in the bottom left-hand corner of those particular those reports. The proposed budget is based on our preliminary ED 279 figures, and what the ED 279 is, it's actually the financial, it's the report that we received from the state that outlines how much subsidy that we're going to receive, and it has a number of different categories and things in that. But the preliminary ED 279 that we received this year was on January 25th, 2021. I didn't put a whole lot of it. I know I've talked about it, but there was a lot of the money and funding for the general education in Maine was based on the initial plan to tax the PPE funds for small businesses. And if you watched any of the reports, I know that was met with a lot of resistance. So that is something to keep an eye on. I know with the new America's CARES Act, that the funding for the municipalities, and there's a lot of money in there for schools as well. I'm not sure, I don't have all the breakdown of that because it hasn't been approved yet. I think it was going to the House today, and then it'll be for the president to sign at some point this week. So there's a lot of moving parts in this budget, and just be aware that that for those that have never been part of this, there's a lot of variables that I'll talk about that can change the budget significantly, both positively and negatively. But for the most part, historically, it's always been in the positive sense, where we received our insurance rates and things that come in after we've already presented, and those help to decrease the budget. I mean, ultimately, like I'll say in here, I mean, we have close to 350 people that are on our payroll and in a number of different capacities. And so the majority, if you go through those expense reports, you're going to find that the majority of the increases are all centered around salaries and benefits. and each year those continue to go up. I know 12 years ago or so, excuse me, 12 years or so, we used to say that the operating cost for the school was around $250,000 each year without doing anything. That number has climbed up into about close to almost $550,000 without doing anything. So keeping all of this budget keeps all of the programs and services in place. There will be some movement as far as restructuring in regard to providing different services. Event our meetings we've talked about, maybe using if our enrollments remain low, we would take a classroom position and then transition that into a guidance position in different schools, and then move some staff in different departments, offset to be able to provide students with different service or different options, but also to decrease classroom sizes. But this current budget as stands does maintain all of our programs and services that we currently have. And it's overall the budget, and if once you start looking at the subsidy comparison report, a lot of these numbers are going to start popping up if you look, especially If you look at the bottom number, which is the bottom two numbers are the ones that most people are interested in, and that is the increase to taxes and the total increase to the budget. So you'll see that the total increase in our budget is $543,802, which is around 3% from the total budget last year. And the total local funding amount, which is in the total budget, including adult education, is in this budget is $18,215,334. The total local funding amount, including adult education and local funding, is how much has to be raised locally, is $8,136,032, which would result in an estimated 7.6% or $577,457 increase in local taxes.
Rick, can I interrupt you just for a second?
Yep.
Twyla, can you let Norm into the meeting, please? Sorry about that, Rick.
No, that's all right. As I mentioned before, the packet that you received with the large number of pages is what we refer to as the budget summary report, and that was the initial budget that we presented, and that's dated February 5th, 2021. We don't go back and re-edit that every time, because when we shift things around, it just changes. It doesn't do a whole lot to that account. It changes the copy of the subsidy comparison report, which makes it a lot easier to read. So you can go through those. You can go through all those lines, and then, like I said, you can watch the presentation that was recorded, and we go through each of those lines. But you're going to hear, as any of you listened to that presentation in the past, it's majority of its salaries and benefits, with a few items that we picked out that were increases this year. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about the total budget. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the contributing factors are to the increases. Talk about the state contribution, the total local funding, which some of those I've already explained a little bit, but I'll go over those in more detail here shortly. I also have a 10-year budget history that I provide every year. I'll talk a little bit about the capital reserve fund and the unassigned fund balance amount, which is the amount of money that's left over at the end of any budget year. And then, as I mentioned before, the variables that are still out there that could produce significant savings, or in some cases even cost. So I'll go over those a little bit once we get through this, or once we go through this presentation. The total budget is a combination of the state and local contributions, adult education, and the revenues. The total amount of the proposed school budget is listed below. Now, some of these numbers, when you look at them, it's not going to, you might not see them jump right out at you. And the reason is because we have to combine, the school budget is a combination of both the regular education. And if you look at the subsidy comparison report, regular education is at the top 3/4 of that page. And then right towards the bottom, you'll see where it says adult education. So what we have to do is, as far as like revenue, state contribution, all those things, we have to combine the numbers. So you won't necessarily see the numbers won't total up. The revenue number will total up because I see right now that the $3,500 for adult ed wasn't added into that, but the decrease should remain the same. The percentage will just drop a little bit, but the revenues are what we would anticipate as bringing in for revenues for the year. And those are a combination of a number of things. We use the unassigned or undesignated account to offset the budget. In the past, we received a state grant for MLTI. We also created a regular instruction reserve account right when the pandemic hit, probably March, April, or May last year. The governor allowed school districts to create a regular instruction reserve account where they could take out of their unassigned lines and put it into that account and use it for regular instruction. Now, we haven't put any funds in there. One, because we don't know what our unassigned is. We still haven't seen we haven't had the audit report yet. Once we have that, we could determine if that's an option. But the other thing is we haven't had to dip into that yet, because we've been able to work within our existing budget. You'll see that we have They're closing the building down here. You'll see that, I'm gonna need to turn those lights on. Give me 1 second, sorry. All right, sorry about that. Can't read my papers if it gets too dark. So if you see me wave my arms, it's because our lights are on motion sensors. So talking about the revenues, the interest credit, when we did the first renovations, and some of you have been on the facilities committee, when we did those initial renovations years and years ago, I think it was about 12 years, one of the first years I took over. We used to get an interest credit because of the type of funding, the bond that we went for. So that has come off the books. And so that's no longer a revenue. The CARES Act was, and there's been many names. There's CRF, there's ESSER, there's all kinds of different names, acronyms and stuff as far as the funding that the schools have received over the last year. We do have some of that money built into here. And once we know what the next level of funding will be, we'll be able to determine how much, if any of those funds that we'll use to offset the cost of this budget. Now, like the municipality, if you build your budget on those revenues, especially when it's stimulus money, what it does is it creates what we call a cliff in our budget, which means that once those funds are gone, you might get them for a year or two, but once those funds are gone, then you have to either reduce those positions or reduce that spending and or raise taxes. And so it makes it, it's a really fine line that we try to avoid when we're doing this work. And the majority of the funds that we've received, we've been able to do a lot of safety improvements within the schools, which has allowed us to return pretty much full in person from the start of the school year, with the exception of a few months after Christmas. So the revenues are outlined there. Overall, it's a 3.4% decrease, around 19,426, simply the difference in the interest credit. The state contribution is $9,603,859, which is about a $59,248 increase, or a 0.006% increase overall. The local contribution, which is the number that most people are focused on, is $8,136,032, which is a 7.6% increase right now, or $577,457 increase. Our total budget with adult ed is again $18,215,334, which is a 3% overall increase, or $543,802. The major contributing factors in this budget include the following items. The first and foremost, as you'll see when you go through the printouts, is salaries and benefits. Another significant increase was jobs for Maine graduates. That's around $25,000. And then we did have some increases in our professional services as far as all the work that we've had done. We had to increase our service agreements with our contractors to take care of all the equipment and stuff that we bought. And overall, I mean, you're talking probably 1.5, close to $2 million worth of renovations, air quality, windows, you name it. We've been able to do that kind of work within our buildings. And we added the O2 Prime sensors, which is an ionizer systems in our schools, which helps to kill everything from mold to COVID to germs, everything. So we put in thermal cameras. So we've used our funding to help us, which has allowed us again to open our schools. And then the revenue decrease, which isn't a lot, but it's still $19,426, and that's a direct result of the interest credit. The state subsidy is determined through a combination of funding formulas. It's extremely complicated. There's really, as I say, every year there's only a few people that have been able to, that really know how to figure it out. And I know that they changed it around just even this year because of COVID. And so as a result, we benefited from that, because even though our state subsidy went up, it it actually went up, whereas a lot of surrounding schools around us, their numbers went down. And I think it's because our enrollment up until last March when COVID hit, our enrollment had been pretty consistent and actually was starting to climb. And we're finding that a lot of the students that were homeschooled throughout the beginning of the year are starting to come back. We're averaging anywhere between just even today, I received a couple of emails, and I think we've registered 4 or 5 kids today. So we were down probably 130 students, 130 to 150, and that number's is starting to go down. I think we're in the 130s now. So we've had 20 or so students registered just in the last few weeks. And quite honestly, if I accepted superintendent agreements, I probably could have added who knows how many students, because when we first opened, we were the only ones open. Everybody in the region wanted to send their kids here, so we had to stop accepting superintendent's agreements because our buildings, the spaces and stuff were all starting to were set up based on the number of kids we had prior to COVID. So the state contribution consists of a number of things that take into a number of factors, including teachers, guidance, librarians, health ed techs, library techs, and clerical. The amount, the essential programs and services, or the EPS number, which is on here, is usually the number that in the past has been a number that people have looked for. As far as if you're over essential programs and services, how much are you over? We are currently over this formula by $3,038,974. The majority of that is a direct result of the fact that our athletics and co-curricular, the reimbursements or subsidy for those for sports and co-curricular is much lower than what we spend. Nutrition, we did pull the funding out, but we had to add, I think it was 200-something thousand into our budget to help offset nutrition costs for the year. Teacher retirement, the main PERS, that was added into that was transitioned from, I think, from the state side over to property taxes years and years ago. So that's something that's a factor in there. And then the substitute pay, which they allow a certain amount, but especially in these times, it's not nearly as enough. So those are some things that some of the primary reasons why we're over essential programs and services. And although that number may seem high, I think if you compare it to other districts, you're looking at what they're over essential programs and services, we're actually doing pretty good. And each year it actually went up by 534,000, which is roughly the cost of it was just a little bit less than what our total budget went up. So we're operating right within those means. The total local funding is the funding that's required to be raised locally through taxes. The current required local contribution, which I shared before, is $8,136,032, which is currently a 7.6% increase. And I don't have the mill rate or anything and to know what that would look like because I don't think it's been set yet. And I know I get asked that. I always direct the press and stuff to Diane so she can give them an estimate, but I don't mess around with those numbers until I actually know what they are, and you usually set those after or pretty close to when our budget was going for approval. So here's a 10-year history of our budget, and you'll be able to see the total budget, the state funding, and the total local funding. And there, by doing the math, you should be able to, well, you can see where the increases are and the amounts. Some years are obviously better than others. We've actually, overall, we had a few years where there was zero or no increase. Unfortunately, lately it's been, there has been an increase because we've been adding, or we needed to put in supports and stuff for our students. And quite honestly, the supports that we put in last year have been critical to everything that we've done this year and been able to provide for students. The social emotional needs of the kids right now is, it's really unknown just how much of a struggle we're going to have with students moving forward. But I can assure you that just based on the original, some of the data and the analysis that we've had on student achievement, that our numbers are actually much better than what the national numbers are. And again, I credit that to the staff and the students being able to come back and work through a pandemic in person. And our numbers, even though we currently have what the state would define as an outbreak at one of our schools, our numbers for positive cases are much lower than a lot of schools around us. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that our staff and students are in a controlled environment for the majority of the week, and they're not out for basically some kids, mine included, my own daughter, when she's done school on Thursday, she's done for basically Friday, and out until the next Tuesday, pending any snow days. So that will give you a little bit of the budget history. And again, we have, like I said, close to 350 people on our payroll right now. The capital reserve fund, some of you may be, I think the majority of the counselors are aware of this, but in 2012, we created this fund to help with maintenance of plant and minor remodeling. The balance as of July is around $28,275, which we'll do a transfer in as soon as we have our unassigned accounts. We build our budget on this capital reserve. Every year we put in $43,209, which helps offset the cost of the difference in the performance contract and the maintenance plans. It's usually offset by savings, but we do use the capital reserve. One thing I can share with you, and especially those on the council that have been active in the facilities committee, is that we have been able to do a lot of renovations and construction without having to go to bonds. And because we've had funds that we put in here, we've done a lot of projects as a result of being able to use these funds. And one big project that we've been talking a lot about is fixing the roof at the middle school. The numbers, some of the initial quotes are coming in much lower than what we anticipated, which is great. And we're hoping that through that we might be able to utilize capital reserve in our existing funds, and maybe even the new CARES Act or the America, the new funding that's coming in from the government, might be able to use that to help offset some of these issues. But the capital reserve fund is something that's a variable that we'll be talking about throughout the whole process. The unassigned account or amount, that's the amount that's left over at the end of the school year that we use to build the budget. We've kept it at about $118,211 for the last several years. And the reason being is that if for whatever reason, one year we did use quite a bit of that to offset the cost of the budget. And as a result, the following year, it just creates a big kind of gap or a cliff is what I refer to when you're using revenues and then those revenues don't come in. It creates a problem with your budget. So we've kept that amount right around there. But we're also thinking that once we get our audit report, we'll be able to, we will know. We believe that there's going to be a decent amount of money left over because we basically weren't in school from March till June. So there's transportation, there's all kinds of different things that we didn't use last year that we would assume would be part of our carryover and or unassigned amount for next year. There are a number of variables still remaining in this budget that can cost and also create savings. Anticipated actual resignations and through restructuring. A lot of people think when people retire that you're going to save all this money, but a lot of times they take single coverage and insurance. And so when you hire somebody new, they come in and if they take a different insurance, especially family, that it's almost a wash in regard to the salaries versus the insurance. So, but again, when we restructure, sometimes that there is savings in there. Sometimes there's cost depending on if we hire somebody that has a lot of experience. The insurance is budgeted right now at 9%. And for every 1% decrease, it'll be a savings of around $32,526. The regular instruction reserve account, which I talked about earlier, that's in place, but we don't have any funds in there right now. That would be probably for emergencies if in fact we weren't able to operate through the school year. The ESSER funds and the CARES Act funds, those are all monies that we've received already. They've been referred to as CRF as well, CARES Relief Funds. So those are funds that we have built in the budget to offset. And I think we have one trauma coach that we hired last year that we're using those funds for. Capital reserve is still in play. Special education, and that can be a cost and a savings depending on if we have students transition into the district that need to be, if we're unable to provide services for them at our alternative program, then that's going to be a cost. But if they're not, then that could be a savings. If we have students instead of sending them out, we can bring them back. So there's a lot of options there that can either cost or save money. Unanticipated revenue is generally what we get through tuition. We don't receive that as much as we used to. That used to be a larger number when we had kids from Durham attending, but those numbers have declined over the years. The unassigned amount, the fund balance is what I've already talked about that. Garley Street revenue, we do have 300,000 built into our budget as far as revenue, and that's actually one area that we are watching real close because our numbers at the Gartley Street School, because of COVID and surrounding schools not sending their kids in, is actually a little bit lower than what we would anticipate. And so we're hoping to at least meet that projected amount, but we were also hoping that it would have been higher. In a normal year, it'd be more than 300,000, or we would hope for more than 300,000. This year, it's going to be really close. And then the latest amount of federal money is there's a million names so far, but the one that seems to be sticking is the American Rescue Plan, which I'm sure you as a municipality are watching that one closely too, because I know there's a lot of money set in there for municipalities to help offset lost revenues. I'm sure you'll be watching that or hearing from that as soon as that comes is official and released. So to summarize, before I go into to answer any questions, the overall budget is 3%, or a total of $543,802. 18,215,334 is the total amount, and the local funding, which would be an increase to taxes, is $8,136,032, which is a $577,457 increase in the local taxes from last year. Any questions?
I have a question, Rick. This is Heather.
Quick. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Hi, Heather.
Thank you. Hi. So how does the increase, the local contribution of 7.6% over last year compare to prior years?
If you look at, I can actually, you know what? I might still have that open. It changes every year. The easiest, while I'm doing this, or if you have the 10-year graph, oh, you don't have the spreadsheet, or you don't have the presentation. I'm sorry. All right, I can provide you with the presentation, and it will go, if you go through, you'll be able to tell, it gives you the average per year. And I have it on, I have it in my working spreadsheet that already does that for me.
Chair, may I?
Sure, let's let Rick get this one out of the way first, Fern. He seems to be searching for something.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, I would say it's been just roughly, and I have it's been anywhere from a decrease of 23,000 1 year to 252, 184, 482, 535, 493, 386, 293, and last year I think it was one.
Okay, so as far as
148.
so numbers, percentages are easier to understand.
Yeah, I guess if you, yeah, I can. I don't have the percentages. I only have. I'm just looking quickly
the
at
numbers.
trying to get
Okay,
two things
yeah,
done,
if you could
but I
share
can-
that, that would be great. Thank
Yep.
you.
The other part to go with that too, Rick, is the fact that the leaping off point, we were looking at what, a 9% last year for 7.6 that dropped down to, is it a 1.5 if I remember correctly? So
Yeah, every year this time is the worst. It's always, I mean, knock on wood, it's always been better, but this is like when we first, like, we don't have, sometimes we don't, and to be honest, that ED 279 hasn't even been adopted yet. That's a preliminary, but as far, yeah, you're right, this is like the beginning, and some of you have been part of this before, and it's kind of like you've seen the same presentation, different numbers. But we've always worked to get the number, always get the number where, you know, as best we can, because quite honestly, with salaries and benefits, the only way you make huge changes in our budget is it's not from pencils and paper, it's from people and positions and programs. So we've been able to maintain those, and you know, we've received a lot of you know, a lot of support from the community so far, just because of we've been fortunate enough to do something, in my opinion, that not too many other schools have been able to do successfully.
Fern,
Yeah, I was just gonna make the comment that, I mean, every year I bring this up, that the uncontrollable costs. So basically just, and I think we've actually kind of looked at this in the past. So year to year, if you would actually make zero in your budget change, just the differences of contractual agreements and step ups and all that stuff is usually what we figured between a $450,000 to $500,000 increase yearly without changing anything. That's strictly just the agreement you have as far as with the staff and union agreements. I mean, is that still pretty fair to say?
Yeah, and this year we have obviously, I mean, I'll be upfront and honest that we negotiated 1-year contracts with all of our groups, and they are the salary increases this year are 3%, and that's the highest it's been in 12 years. It's usually it's been anywhere between 0 and 1.75, 2 point something. But again, under the circumstances, what our staff have been able to pull off in the last year has been pretty impressive. And so the difference, I think they had negotiated at 2.75. So the year before 2.5, 2.75, and so we went to 3%. And that's the first time that we've had a 3% in a long time. It's since before I was superintendent, and that was common years like 16, 18 years ago when I first came here, but we haven't had that in a long time. This is the most. But again, our kids are at 100 and something days right now, and most surrounding schools are going to get 75 total in-person days at the end of the year at the rate they're going. They'll count their remote days, but I'll be honest, I don't think any parents, you're going to convince any parent that the remote days are of a whole lot of value.
Just one other thing to follow up on that is I do realize that you thought of the any monies we get, being careful using them, because it's kind of like that. We call them, like candy high too, right? You get some extra, and then the next year you don't have it anymore. So you're trying to figure out where to bring it from. But is there anything coming up in the near future, Rich, in the next year or two, as far as for any debt services coming down that actually will offset if we were to have to use any of that money to actually offset the balance of the budget this year?
We haven't had a whole lot of conversations just because we've been just so focused on reopening. But one of the things we did talk about is that when the bond came off the books for the front of the high school, which it just did, is that we would look at taking that and redoing the pavement, but the driveways and stuff, because that's where it came from 12 years ago or whatever it was, 15 years ago. Must have been a 10-year bond. But so we took that money and then we put it into the front of the building, the main entrance, the siding and everything. And then now that's coming off the books, and it's almost like that's something, if you've driven around the schools, especially the middle school, the driveways and stuff are things that need to be repaired. But the big item is also the roof at the middle school, but we're trying to avoid going to bond for anything. But yeah, there's a whole, I think in a few more years, I don't want to give you the wrong answer, but I know that the big number is the community school when that comes off the books. We've talked about, I know that people that are on facilities, and especially the Performing Arts Center, is that they've been waiting around for that particular amount to come off the books, because it is pretty significant locally.
What is the amount that came off the books this year for the, for that 10-year note? Do you know what that was right off? And has that been already figured into
Like
this year's
30
budget?
some, it would be, it's already been absorbed as a savings. It's about 30 something thousand, I believe.
Rick?
Yep.
A follow-up question to Fern. You're right in the dooryard with what we would expect with 550 grand. For you didn't change anything. We're expecting that bump. Are you seeing this dropping out in the additional local at the 577? Is there anything that's driving that, or is that the formula you would have expected?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at our budget sheets, everything's salaries and benefits really, but I mean, when you can limit your increases to, I mean, in years past, we had big increases because of Gartley Street School. When we created that program, we had to hire a number of staff. But this is pretty, in my opinion, I mean, I've presented much higher numbers. I think the worst I ever presented was about 800 something one year, but you know, that number's at 577 right now. Quite honestly, if our insurance comes in at like 2 or 3%, you know, you're talking a pretty good chunk of money. It's every percent is 30 something thousand. So the number's not going up, never has. And it will get better, but we are pretty careful with how we use the revenues. Because like I said, we were able to do a lot of renovations. I would say, based on my last conversation with the contractors who do our performance contracts, we have been able to take care of almost probably 60 or 70% of all of our HVAC needs in 1 year. And that's the long-term benefits of that for students. I mean, the fact that you have windows now in the high school that will open or stay open and can be locked and for security reasons, and you have the Univents and the O2 primes. I mean, there's, you know, there's so much. And then, you know, if you look at our capital plan, the amount of money and the amount of work that the town that we've been able to do locally with local funds without having to go to referendum or bonds is pretty impressive. I mean, some of the work that we've been able to pull off is pretty impressive. So we do watch the funds, but we're also real careful. I know the last time we had stimulus, it was like 1.2 million. The following year, I needed to make 1.2. My first year, I had to make $1.2 million in cuts, and that was staff, pretty much. That was my first year, and so we had the stimulus money to do that. But if we would use that stimulus money, it would have ended up just being even more the following year. And so what we did is we put it all into and I know Fern, I know you were part of that, and I think Dawn was too, but we put that into that high school, because a lot of people, unless you went to school there, don't even realize that school wasn't even handicap accessible until 10 or so years ago, when we put that main entrance, moved it down lower. And that's where those funds came from, so.
Infrastructure is definitely going to pay off in spades down the line, because
Yep.
a lot of your peers actually did it in gimmicks, where they might have invested in IT, but that only has a shelf life of less than 5.
Mhm.
If they put it in programs, as soon as the funding dries up, they're right back there trying to figure out how they're going to make up that gap next year. So that's a
Yep.
great soundbite for the general public. The middle school roof, remind me, and for the benefit of the finance committee, is that in this budget or capital improvement plan, or is that the prior?
It's in the capital improvement plan, but it's not budgeted. It would be like, once we get the audit back, if we have money left, money in the unassigned, the amount that we could transfer into the capital reserve and use those funds. I have no intention right now of having to go to bond, because the number is a lot lower than what we thought.
Just because this is a recorded, how favorable are we talking?
Well, we're still waiting for bids, so I don't want to I can't give you a number, but I can tell you that it's our estimates and stuff. The number's pretty competitive. Well within what I believe I'd be able to recommend that once we get our audit. I just know that we didn't spend money on certain things. I mean, we didn't have any co-curricular from March on, and I know that alone was significant, you know, enough to pay for a quarter of what that roof is.
Perfect. And
How bad is the roof?
I'm sorry?
I'm coming in late. How bad is the roof?
The middle school roof is pretty bad.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
like-
there's a lot of pieces on, there's, the material is, I mean, that was in 1970s, I think, and all we've done is patch it, and every time we patch it, it comes undone, and next thing you know, we got water running down the ceiling. And we've done a lot of work over there, a lot of ceiling tiles and stuff, so anytime that happens, it looks awful. So that is one of the biggest, well, when we did the, last time we did the community forum, the future search with the community, the focus has always been, since I've been here, the focus has always been on the high school. And that was the first time the community said it's time to put money into the middle school. The bathrooms and stuff, we just remodeled the bathrooms. That's another example of what we've used for the capital reserve, is we remodeled all the bathrooms at the middle school. And then the next big ticket item is the roof. And it's a flat roof, and it's the material that we have up there just isn't holding out. So they're gonna have to redo it. And that would be a big, and then actually the high school roof and in the 70s wing, I believe, is the next one that needs to be done. So there's never gonna be, your projects are just as, you finish one and you go to the next, but you're right, the infrastructure, and I think that, at least in this school committee, in the last, several years, has really focused on the infrastructure, and our buildings look a lot better. It's killed us in the whole new building construction project for the high school, but I think our high school is in much better condition than it was, when I first came here 20 years ago.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Sorry, Fern.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I actually have an answer on, I think, Fern, you'd asked me about what's coming up. Haley just texted me. The bond savings this year would be 36,848 and 45,000 in interest savings.
I'd say I don't think anybody would disagree that the paving, especially up around the middle school, needs to be redone. I guess my hope would be on that is if there is money coming forward, I mean, and it is part of the capital plan, that I know Alan's actually been pretty aggressive with the town council to try to do early numbers to try to get better dollar amounts. And I would think that you would actually get a better bang for your buck if you actually did that in conjunction with the town as far as for the bidding process. I'm not sure, Alan, does that play in the
I was gonna ask that.
perspective?
You got me thinking on that terms too, Rick. Fern, I mean, is that if you have any traction, is there any intent to be able to do paving this season?
Do we? I mean, everything's in play at this point, but I'm really focused on that roof.
Okay,
I literally walk by one room. We have a guidance counselor who's been in our office forever. We replaced dozens and dozens of tiles, and every single time we fix it, the next time and with the rain coming and the melting, it's just a matter of time before we get more leaks. And it's that having water in your buildings, as you know, is not good.
that's a fair answer. If you have any idea of potential of what could be for paving this year,
Mhm.
let Randy and Diane know sooner than
Yep.
later, because
Yeah, we used to, in the past, we've hired them on I don't know what your schedule is anymore, but we used to do that on the Fridays that they had off. So it actually worked out good. They got overtime and we got a lot of work done. So I don't know what they're,
I'm advocating right now is the fact is if we could actually include the school's work in our scope of service for our bid going out, to be able to see if we can't get them to actually do that for the pricing that they're charging us versus.
Yep.
If it's something that you have of that nature, we'll add it to the scope of services. The caveat on that is the same as what we have. It's subject to final approval of the budget. So the fact is, it wouldn't kick in until July anyways, because at that point, when the budgets are ratified by the voters for what goes for yours and ours at the end of June. But it's a placeholder for discussion to be able to, if it benefits you at all. If it doesn't, we can say no, but to Fern's point, it just seems like rather than the Band-Aid approach to be able to address it, if you've got a need and you've got that ability with some of the funds left over, let Diane know and we can include it if you
Yep.
would.
Yeah, and I know, like once I know what our unassigned amount is, then I can have conversations on what that will look like.
Going to have it on the next agenda to ask council permission to go out to bid on our paving so that we can get on the early schedule. So if you can get that to me sooner rather than later so that we can include it in our bid package.
I believe Alan has already, our Alan has already looked into that in the past and probably has some estimates so he could
Okay.
share with Randy.
Perfect. Thank
Pretty sure we've already gone out and looked at what that would be. And quite honestly, the town, like I said, the town has always been able to do a lot of the repairs and different things. So
And then I'm sure Randy would be very much to be able to help you with that again too, but what I'm hearing is that you're looking potentially at more than just a repair.
Yeah.
So if there's a benefit there, then it makes sense to actually include it the other way. The other piece on that, for the public that's listening, when is the audit expected to be able to benefit Rick? I know we filed the appropriate extensions and everything else, but what's the timeline on that?
Our side is holding that up, Alan. They're still working on our part of the audit.
Okay, any time frame?
I don't. I've got to get after them to find out. I'm hoping we don't have to have another extension, but
Can you?
they're still working on it.
Perfect. The sooner you can get that information out to the school department, that will be beneficial for this process as well too.
I have a related question, but maybe not relevant. I don't know. Can I ask anyway?
You know,
for
Yeah.
Alan or me?
Well, speaking of not paving or not doing roofs or doing roofs at LCS, you said the middle school, right?
Middle school, yep. Yeah, the high school's had a bunch of work.
I'm in the wrong school. I'm thinking LCS, and my question was, is there something going to happen to that interim road that goes around for loading and unloading through the parking lot out there?
Well, we've talked about that in the fall. We couldn't pave it or anything, but I think they put reclaim around it, didn't they?
I don't know. I haven't seen it since it's been
Yeah.
covered.
I mean,
think they
if
did
it's-
part of it.
To be honest, more and more people are starting to let their kids ride the bus. So our buses are starting to get pretty crowded. So, I mean, when we put that in, you're talking 300 plus families were dropping their kids off.
Okay.
So the cars were going all the way around, all the way out to the road and stopping the buses from even getting in. That had sent, I mean, they have a really good system in place now, but those numbers have declined. And quite honestly, if they would change the capacity in a room or on a bus to more than 50, we'd be all set.
Okay.
But everything is at 50, regardless if it's a bus or a gymnasium, everything's at 50.
Thank
It
you.
was at 100 for a few weeks, which really helped because we went from about 20 or 15 different rooms for lunches down to 4. But the other thing is they also changed the contact tracing. So if there's a positive case in a room, then the whole room has to quarantine. It's not like it is out in the public sector. It's got to be 6 feet, more than 15 minutes. In schools, it's everybody in the room for more than, if the kids or somebody's positive in a room for more than 15 minutes, the entire room has to quarantine, which is a nightmare. If they change that to what the public sector was, we'd be in really good shape because all our kids are far enough apart.
Any other questions for Rick, guys?
Bob just texted me and said they're going to be using that circle moving forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you guys for coming tonight. Appreciate that, Rick.
All right, thank you. And like I said, this was the first presentation and we'll have updates from now till we've had updates pretty much right before June. So we'll be good to go.
Yeah, and just for the finance committee's benefit, the fact is this comes down to that night when you last see Rick in June. There's a specific date where we will go warrant item by warrant item for a specific dollar amount that will appear on the ballot. The council goes through that exercise with what they have for the final budget for each individual item. It has to be accepted by roll call by council because it sets what appears on that June ballot, July ballot. What time frame this year, Twyla? I see her chuckling at me. She's amazing. You're on mute, Twyla. Go ahead, hit it. She's still muted.
Twyla, you're muted.
June 8th is the election.
Right.
So we'll be voting
Yeah.
on the school budget validation referendum question then.
Perfect.
Yes.
Yep.
So Rick, moving forward with this kind of unique setting, I mean, how are we going to, are you going to forward the information to us on finance committee as you get it, just to give us updates, or there's going to be specific timeframes to the budget presentation? I mean,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
guess,
we usually post everything on our webpage as soon as the school committee approves it. I'd have to look at our timeline. It'll probably be, at least once we get the insurance, things like that we'll start talking about. We'll do it during workshops. I think budget is on our workshop for the next couple of months. So we'll be presenting any recommendations, especially any realignments and stuff. But Heather, what I was going to say is if you email me your questions, and same thing with anybody else in the finance or town council, if you email it to me, then I'll be sure to get back to you, because if I try to remember that you asked for percentages, I'm going to forget about it tomorrow. So if you just email, that's the best way, because that gets basically put in my to-do box. And so then I can respond and know that I've taken care of it. That's the best way to reach me to get answers. Just once you start looking at it, if you have any questions, you can email me, and I can, if I can't answer it, I can get the answers. I know Haley's on tonight and other people. But we'll get those figures for you.
Thank you, Rick.
In that, for the benefit of the entire group, the way that we approached this starting the last 2 years, and we're going to continue this year, especially where everything's going to be virtual for the larger group. Email everybody that's here, all finance committee members, all council, to be able to make sure that the question gets the answer. That way we're not duplicating effort. I'd like not to hammer Rick or Diane with the departments, the various question repeatedly. When we get moving to the individual divisions part of it, the intention will be that when we have a set date to go through 3 divisions, I'll use, for example, police, fire, and EMS, the goal would be to actually ask the questions of us in advance, so Diane can just get the answers for us, and that we're not wasting time during a workshop to be able to go through the specifics of that. Anything new that night would be what we would actually cover. Thank you, Rick. That's a good point.
could you actually forward someone forward us an email with everybody's email on it so we can capture that, especially the ones with the finance committee, so we have that?
Yes, Diane, can you do that for us? I know that the way that we actually approach it here was the fact that some of it's coming from finance, some of it's coming from you. If you could do master mailing that we could do that for this purpose, that would be very helpful.
I'll create a group that includes everybody in the school on it.
Great. Anything else? Seeing none, thank you, Rick.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Twyla, back to you. I'm looking at the
Thanks.
agenda. I don't know what left of content, but I'll defer to you.
Right, next would be other business. Did you want to go through their committee reports?
No, we just did them last week, so I'd wait for a regular meeting if I could, please.
Then a town manager's report would be next.
The only thing I have tonight is we spent all day working on the budget, 3 of us. So I'm hoping it will be finalized tomorrow, and I'll send out an email so that you know to pick up the thumb drives. And I also have warrants in dispatch that need signatures, and our payroll needs to be signed tomorrow.
Do you need multiple signatures or just one?
I need multiple on the school AP one. I don't know if there's a school AP over there. I know the school payroll and our payroll, so it's only one signature.
I'll show up tomorrow.
Okay, and then I'll check in the morning and I'll send out another text.
Okay. And I just have a question, if I could, out of line here. Kurt, would you call me when this is over, please? Okay, thank you.
Next, Twyla.
So there are no appointments. Any counselor communications?
Seeing none, I thank you guys the way that we've approached this, and I've tried to express it through the chair for the finance committee, is the fact that thank you guys for everything you're doing. After this year, we will establish the routine. There's a little bit of flexing and growing pains associated with that, but very much appreciative of what you guys are doing and looking forward greater depth in what we can actually explore as we go through this process. So thank you.
And the next item is the audience participation and response for new items. So those listening from town hall, live video streaming are now invited to send written comments by emailing award@lisbonme.org. Counselor Ward will review his emails at this time.
I still have nothing at this time, Twyla, so we're good. Next item.
So there's no executive session. The next order is to adjourn. So
Make that,
I roll call.
Okay, I got Mr. Fellows. I need the second.
I'll second.
I got Jeff.
All right. So Counselor Fellows,
yes.
Counselor Colby,
Yes.
Counselor Ganong,
Yes.
Counselor Lunt,
Yes.
Counselor Ward,
Yes.
Counselor La Rochelle,
Yes.
and Counselor Albert.
I saw the thumbs up, Twyla.
Okay, order passed 7-0. We stand adjourned.
Thank you, Twyla. Have a great night, all.
You're welcome.
Thank you, guys.